Okay.
Welcome, everybody. This is Michael McAvoy. Good to have you here. This is the MTHFR, Methylation and Biochemistry Master Course Support Call. It is Wednesday, May 11th, 2016. Great to have you here. We got a great case study planned. Gretchen King is here, and she's going to be presenting here in just a few minutes. So I'd like to welcome all of our new course participants. We have over 200 clinicians who have taken the course, and we're getting people to sign up on a regular basis. Congratulations to the new people. Congratulations to all of the recent clinicians who have completed the course and have gotten their certification. Hope that you're finding the material very useful in your practice. Remember that we have 3 modules, and the 3rd module was recently added a few months ago, and that is on estrogen metabolism and detoxification. So speaking of course material, I'd like to do a screen share with you guys, and I'm very, very excited to present to you the new course that is now available. And this is the addition to a lot of the work that I've been doing. Hopefully you can see the screen share here. This is the blood sugar and insulin resistance mastery course. And this course is a result of, I don't know, a couple thousands of hours of clinical research and practice, maybe more, I'm not sure. This is a course that is all about the intricacies of glucose utilization. What goes wrong with somebody who has insulin resistance, the specific biochemical mechanisms that start to falter, as well as an in-depth analysis of what to do. We go deeply into the biochemistry and physiology of glucose metabolism. We study some new pathways, which many of you may not be familiar with, but are certainly very relevant. And I should say that there's a lot of crossover between this material and the material you learn in the master course, the MTHFR course. You're going to learn in depth about the pentose phosphate pathway, glycolysis. You're going to learn about GLUT4 signaling, and you're going to learn about ways to interpret test results. We're going to go into specific blood chemistry markers that are related to glucose metabolism, liver function, blood glucose, insulin, etc. And of course, just like we had structured in the MTHFR Methylation and Biochemistry Master Course, we're going to have there's a specific section where we study the effect of various nutrients and botanicals. We look at the top 10, and I basically plug in. There's over 125 studies that I've carefully reviewed in preparing this course. So we go over all of that stuff. We go over diabetic complications, pathways that lead to diabetic complications. We look at additional blood chemistry markers related to inflammation, and as well as kidney function. Dealing with the long-term effects of insulin resistance can have extraordinarily deleterious effects on cell physiology. And of course, the program also discusses ways to individualize a nutrition program. This includes the use of food charts, intake data, diet check logs to help you track your client's progress. And essentially, we're teaching you how to conduct a 30-day glucose optimization program so that you can help your clients that have problems with insulin resistance, poor glucose utilization. So this course is about ready to be released. We're less than 7 days from launch, and I want to tell you that as a student and clinician who's taken the MTHFR Methylation and Biochemistry Master Course, you are going to get first access to this material when it goes on sale next week. So look for the emails. That's coming very soon. And I just can't be more excited about this course. You know about my intensity and passion when it comes to this type of material. And so this is going to be just another all-out information loaded, directly applicable to your practice, Monday morning type of a course that you guys will appreciate. So look for that. That's coming out next week. Again, we're very excited. We're going to be doing that. All right. So let's go ahead and turn this support call over to Gretchen King. Gretchen, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So Gretchen, you got a case study to present, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get into that and just see if I can plug in all the data here, make sure we've got everything dialed in. Bear with me just one moment. Okay, so it's that. Okay. Okay, so, okay, Gretchen, so take it away. So tell us a little bit about this client.
Okay.
Give us a little bit about the client's history, and then we'll look over the labs.
Okay. This client came to me because she had just had a recent MRI, and she has a pituitary tumor, and the pituitary tumor had grown, and the doctors were not worried about it. And her words were she was sick of a reason why. So anyway, she's 57-year-old. She's menopausal. She's a property manager for an apartment complex, and she loves her job. It's not stressful, except for the fact that she was just pursuing her real estate license, and she did pass that after I think it was after our second visit. So her stress has been somewhat relieved, but due to she's getting so extremely fatigued that she had to cut back her hours to part-time, which is, she loves her job. So, she's always been kind of the Energizer bunny, lots of energy. But she's now on like blood pressure meds and sleep meds and pain meds. And she just, wants to feel well again. So she's had her tumor since 2011. And they have discovered 3 to 4 new lesions, but they're still not worried about it. The doctors state that it is non-acromegaly and that it is non-hormone fed. Her main goal is that she would like to eliminate fatigue and her pain. She would love to get off meds if she could possibly. Some of the things that, stood out to me is her elimination was terrible. Her sleep is terrible.
Standard American diet.
Yes. And when we first started talking, she was about 80% committed. And I asked her, what can make you 100%? And she said, if I just felt a tiny bit better, I would be 100% committed. And I said, okay, that's fair enough. And anyway, she committed right away to doing as many tests as I wanted. And, but she, okay, the 3 questions that I asked her what would change her, to make her feel more committed. If she could eliminate the 5 symptoms that would change her life, what would they be? And she said, eliminate knee pain, increase her physical energy and mobility, and improve ability to focus, and succeed at weight loss. And she has toenail fungus that she's had since her 20s, and she's never been able to get rid of that. She has put on a considerable amount of weight, and she did state that her features have changed so much that kids have commented about how funny she looks in the store. And, she doesn't even recognize herself when she looks in the mirror. But she said that's the least of her worries. She wants her energy back. And then I asked her, what would you consider to be optimal health? And she said eating whole and real foods always, being able to move pain-free, losing the desire to eat processed foods, and losing her sugar addiction. And what would be progress and health to you? Taking baby steps that move me toward the optimal health goals, being mindful of how poor choices make me feel worse and don't give me the life that I want to have. So I was pretty happy with her responses. And I will say that she has extreme brain fog, and she is willing to do whatever that I think is best, but she also wants me, just to give her baby steps so she can succeed. And one thing she said over and over again is that she's super, super sensitive to anything she tries to take, like supplement wise. Okay, she's had extreme pain. She feels like the tumor has grown. Her jaw and teeth, they don't fit together any longer. Her nose, hands, feet, they're still growing. She's had her hormones tested. She's had the like growth hormone and luteinizing hormone, and the doctors feel confident that it's not from that. She does have amalgams. She's lost her zest for life. And one thing that she did comment, we talked about how emotional issues can keep us from healing. She was sexually abused as a child. She also is not in the most happy of relationships. She's been married for, I can't remember how long she said, but it's over 20 years. Anyway, she committed during that time to see her therapist again, and she did tell me that she set up an appointment. My first impressions with her obviously were lots of methylation issues, inflammation, neurotransmitter. Her diet was likely contributing. She has likely blood sugar issues and lots of toxicity. She sent me labs straight from her doctor. We started talking in January, and she had just had blood work towards the end of December. And I requested that she get an HTMA done, an OAT, a Dutch 23andMe, and a full thyroid panel. We're still waiting on the Dutch and 23andMe, but we have the other results to cover today. So,
okay, looks good. So, Gretchen, your overall impression here in terms of her tumor growth and her pituitary, have the doctors made any? Have they had any discussion about removing it? Is there a need to remove it in their opinion? I'm assuming it's relatively benign. It's not cancerous.
They don't think it's cancerous. They have not done a biopsy. They're basically not worried about it and told her she shouldn't be, but she kind of joked and she said, would you worry if you had a tumor in your brain? Like, yeah. So anyway, she feels like there's a cause and she wants to know why it's there. I did tell her all along, I said, you know, I am not even going to pretend that I can help that tumor disappear. I said, I don't ever want you to come away with that. But what I do feel like is that we might be able to help your brain fog and help you feel better. And, you know, just by maybe giving you nutrients that you're missing. And so I'm in Missouri and I'm not allowed to give specific dietary recommendations, which is really a drag. So I try to do it, like teach them how to educate themselves. Anyway, but she immediately told me that she would eliminate grains and sugar. She knows that she has a poor diet and she recently started studying on her own. And she, you know, she said, I want to commit to 2 things at a time that I'll do, you know, to correct her diet. And so the next time I spoke with her, she had eliminated sugar and grains, with the exception at one business function, she had a piece of bread. And she said she ate the next day. And it gave her such hope that somebody was finally dealing with her diet. She said, you know, not once had a doctor addressed that she should give up sugar. And she was so excited with the improvement in how she felt that she got 100% committed. And, you know, I could hear it in her voice, that just the excitement. And she sent me a text just telling me, I love you, I love you, I love you, I'm feeling better. So anyway, just on diet. It's like, it's so sad to me, but anyway.
Well, that's great that you helped to identify that her diet was probably a major problem here. And obviously her elimination of gluten seemed to be a major component in helping to reduce some of her aches and pains.
Yes.
Okay, so anything else you want to talk about here before we get into the tests?
I don't think so. I'll just go over what we covered on each test, I guess.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. So first test here is the OAT test. You ran it through with Great Plains. And yeah. First section here, the first 9 markers are all yeast fungal markers. And what do we see here? Which fits with
her fungus on her toes.
Right, so she's showing the hyarabinose. That's a
very
common yeast marker, so that's showing up.
Yes. And then she's also presenting with C. diff, and she knows what C. diff is. Her children have both been in the hospital. She knows that it's not a good thing to have. She said, "This is scary." And I was like, "Well, at least you know now, and you can address it and hopefully start feeling better." And anyway.
Right. So she's showing the 4-hydroxyphenylacetate as well as borderline elevated C. cresol. These are both metabolites of Clostridium difficile. The first one, the marker number 15, 4-hydroxyphenylacetate, could also be a marker of other Clostridium species, such as the Stricklandii.
On this one, would you recommend like another stool test, or would you feel like she could handle eliminating this? But eventually, would you recommend a stool test as well?
Well, that certainly is a good question and a possibility worth considering. I think that when you're dealing with people that have this kind of presentation of symptoms and pain, joint pain, as well as you mentioned, certain sensitivities to supplements and even drugs, it suggests to me that there's a gastrointestinal component for sure. Mm-hmm. The preliminary evidence on the O-test is quite revealing in terms of leading one to conclude that the gut function is a central component in her health. So I think that that's pretty weighted evidence that, yeah, it might not be a bad idea to do that in the future.
Okay. I might add that she tried Megaspore, and I told her very, very slow, like just literally take a small pinch and see how you do. And she had pretty bad stomach pains. And she's willing to keep going on supplementing probiotics. But I told her to go very slow, and she committed to doing a pinch every 3 days. Mm-hmm. That's how sensitive she is. Like she's, Yeah,
I mean, and she may have some sort of die-off reactions, or her gut flora may be compromised to such degree where her body is literally her intestinal tract is in a battle between commensal, opportunistic, and potentially pathogenic microbes. So
my thought is now trying to build that up with the probiotics and the eventually a Spilardi, and trying to address like methylation pathway, and possibly getting her to eliminate good and possibly sleeping before we address any of the bacterial stuff. Is that?
Well, there's no one right formula for doing it. One thing that you might need to look out for is that if you stimulate methylation too quickly, you can trigger an immune response, which may not necessarily be desirable, especially if they have pre-existing neurological or neurotransmitter-related issues. So the SAMe that gets generated from increasing methylation could feed into the polyamine pathway, which could potentially be deleterious on neurotransmitter activity. So you may want to just consider reversing that and really try addressing gastrointestinal function, supporting her digestion, doing that really foundational stuff to kind of clear my inclination would be to address the gastrointestinal function first. And see what kind of progress you can make with that. I mean, she's already improving and getting progress just by changing her diet. So, and that's the thing, is that when you're working with complex cases that are on multiple medications, this is not going to be an overnight process. It's going to be a slow, progressive course that is going to take months and months and months to unravel. And so, but the good thing is, if you can win little battles along the way with getting things like, pointing out to her, or her being able to see that eating gluten causes inflammation in her body, that reducing sugar has its benefits, that improving what she's eating has its benefits, that by maybe taking digestive enzymes and by taking probiotics, that those are making small but significant improvements in the way she feels, and that will continue to build her confidence in continuing to move forward with you. So I think overall, my initial impression is don't try to do too much at first.
Yes.
Try to just, I mean, there's a lot of, you know, let's be honest, there's a lot of low-hanging fruits here.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how many complex pathways are screwed up. If a person's diet is terrible, it doesn't matter. You have to address that. That has to be addressed first. So you're in the right direction.
Okay.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about gut function. Let's go to the next page, the report. And so now what's interesting is that a lot of times when you see elevated arabinose, you see that the oxalates are high also, but we're not seeing that here.
Yeah.
So it's somewhat of an anomaly. You know, usually if the arabinose is elevated, or even if it's borderline elevated, you'll see the oxalic acid or the glyceric acid elevated, but curiously they're not, which is fine. You do see the pyruvate is slightly elevated. What's your impression of that?
Well, I was thinking possibly a B1 deficiency, but I was wondering also, can that be elevated by just her plain old gut imbalance?
Well, it's a good question. I think I think you're onto something with the B1 thiamine connection. We do know, based on her blood work, which we will be looking at shortly, that she does have her hemoglobin A1C is pretty high. It's like 6.2. So she does tend to have higher glucose. That could be a reason why her pyruvate is high. Remember that pyruvate is basically a product of the glycolysis, you know, the oxidation of glucose. So these are common things. Seeing elevations in pyruvate may, you know, be corresponding to abnormal glucose utilization.
Okay.
Which, as you pointed out, yeah, it's a thiamine-dependent enzyme.
Okay. And I'm leaning towards benfotiamine. Is that what you?
Well, that's a good choice. Benfotiamine is a fat-soluble form of thiamine, lipid solubility, and because it's got a lipid solubility, it has the ability to enter cells more efficiently than just water-soluble thiamine does. But the other benefit with benfotiamine in her case is because she does have an elevated hemoglobin A1C, suggesting that there's glycation. Her glucose is glycating the hemoglobin. Benfotiamine can actually reduce the formation of advanced glycation end products, which would be formed from somebody that has glycation and it's excessive. So I think that's a reasonable thing to consider.
Okay.
Yeah, good job on that.
Okay.
So what else do we see on page 2? Anything else jump out at you as important to kind of look at?
I guess the number 24, mag deficiency, I would say, possibly problems clearing ammonia. But it was one of those things, like there's so much to consider. What's the top ones? I had already recommended that she supplement mag from her hair analysis. And I am waiting on her 23andMe as well. The next one, number 28, that's from what I can tell, I'm still new at this. This is my first OAT test, so I'm very new at this. And I just finished your program. I haven't even taken the quiz yet, or the test yet. Anyway, I'm thinking that it's vitamin C dependent, and also she's needing glutathione.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, markers 24 through 29 are all basically metabolites of the Krebs cycle, of the citric acid cycle. Versus markers 22 and 23, these are metabolites of glycolysis. So basically, it's great we're talking about this on the eve of the release of the new glucose course, where this stuff is discussed a little bit more in depth. But basically, when glucose enters into the cell, one of the pathways it goes into is glycolysis. And it gets oxidized into pyruvate, and pyruvate gets converted into acetyl coenzyme A, which then goes into the Krebs cycle. And so the Krebs cycle spins out these metabolites. So you mentioned succinate. Okay. Succinate is it's often dependent on CoQ10, vitamin E, as well as magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
My overall impressions here is that usually the markers 24 and 25 are more relevant if they're elevated, not necessarily if they're low.
Mm-hmm.
Same is true with 29 and 27. These are more relevant if they're elevated, not low. Malic acid, they have a range here between 0.6 and 1.8, and she is kind of on the lower side of that. Malic acid is somewhat of an underappreciated supplement in terms of its ability to keep the Krebs cycle moving at more of an optimal rate, as well as functioning to improve. It's an acid with a 6% hydrogen, so it actually could be used to support digestive function as well. But I mean, overall, it appears to me that the primary issue with her glucose utilization is more at the glycolysis cycle, given the pyruvate being borderline high. Mitochondrial markers, Krebs cycle intermediates, they don't look that bad, so I'm not necessarily that concerned about those.
Okay. The next one I was more concerned about was marker 33, 34, 36,
right.
39.
Right. So going back to her symptom checklist, she's got low energy. Does she have sleep issues as well?
Oh, yes, terrible. She's been on sleep meds for several years, and she still doesn't sleep well. She's a night owl.
Yeah. So her, we can say pretty fairly that her
Yes.
her circadian rhythms are all off. She's taking Xanax, which is benzodiazepine.
Yes.
Which presumably is she have symptoms of anxiety?
Yes, somewhat, but not. She said more. She has, instead of anxiety, she would classify it just, she can't think straight.
She has a lack of focus.
Yes, and she used to be quick on her feet. As far as thinking, she could remember people that came to her. She's a property manager, so she needs that to be able to. And she said now it's like she just can't remember things.
Right. Yeah. So this is a really, really good set of symptoms to really pay attention to, especially in relationship to marker number 33. So homovanillic acid is the product of the breakdown of dopamine. Dopamine, of course, is a central neurotransmitter in the formation of the catecholamines, and she's showing a low level right at the very bottom here of HVA. She has symptoms of low dopamine as well, symptoms of loss of concentration, lack of focus. You mentioned brain fog. Some other interesting things regarding dopamine is that dopamine may modulate the pain response of the body. Dopamine also is antihypertensive. She's got blood pressure issues. She is taking a calcium channel blocker. She is taking an angiotensin II antagonist. She's taking a diuretic. So yet another interesting thing with dopamine is that the direct precursor of dopamine, the amino acid precursor tyrosine, is critical for thyroid function. And as we're going to look at her blood work coming up, her T4 and T3 levels are both low, despite a quote-unquote normal or unremarkable TSH. So all of the evidence here seems to suggest that she's got some major dopamine issues.
Yes.
And so as we look at 33 and 34, 34 is vanilmandelic acid, which is basically the product of noradrenaline and adrenaline. These are the catecholamines that are produced from dopamine. So if she's not making sufficient dopamine, she's going to struggle to make VMA as well, and that is checking in on the lower side. And then we get to the tryptophan metabolites, 5-hydroxyindoacetate, which is marker number 36. This is the serotonin, 5-HIAA, as we learned from module 2 of the course, is the main serotonin metabolite. She is taking a serotonin antagonist reuptake inhibitor, and that may very well be affecting the results of this test.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see 37 and 38. These are not remarkable. The quinolinic acid is basically a neurotoxic metabolite that is a promoter of the NMDA receptor, the glutamate receptor, but it's not showing as being elevated. It's on the lower side. Marker 38, that's of the same pathway as the quinolinate is formed in, and that's not high. That would be a B6 and magnesium deficiency marker. So, but quite clearly, this marker number 33 is a real big clue, along with her symptomology and symptom presentation: brain fog, hypertension, pain, lack of focus and concentration. She's having some very probable dopamine-related issues, dopamine deficient-related issues. And we also learned from the lab report that Clostridium can inhibit the enzyme that converts dopamine into noradrenaline.
Mm-hmm.
And that enzyme is known as DBH, or dopamine beta hydroxylase. It requires PQQ, vitamin C, and copper as the cofactors. But we know that enzyme, that DBH enzyme, can be inhibited by Clostridium difficile.
Right.
So there is a potential microbial related issue here, which again, we did see that the Clostridium, 2 of the Clostridium metabolites are elevated.
Mm-hmm.
So again, coming back to the gut. And the other thing to know generally is that in order to make dopamine, you've got to have the amino acid precursors. A lot of times just by improving digestive function, supporting gastrointestinal function, you can see improvements in dopamine. Give somebody high quality animal protein, and you'll help them to make more dopamine because you're giving them high quality amino acids just through diet.
Mm-hmm.
And if her digestion is poor, she may not be metabolizing those amino acids as she needs to.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask, on marker 39, could that simply be high from the side effects of C. diff?
No, not likely. Well, let's talk about what 39 actually is. So basically what happens is that tryptophan, with the amino acid L-tryptophan, it goes down 2 different pathways. And actually they say that about 90%, maybe 95% of the tryptophan that's present in the body goes towards the kynurenic pathway for the formation of kynurenic acid as well as quinolinic acid to get made. So 95% of tryptophan goes here. The other 5 or 10% goes towards making serotonin. So what the ratio is indicative of is there is more tryptophan going down the quinolinic acid pathway than there is down the serotonin pathway, possibly too much,
Mm-hmm.
according to what the lab report is saying. And so looking at the individual levels of these, 36 is on the lower side, and 37 in relation to 36 is high.
Okay.
Is that being caused by Clostridium? I don't think so, but we know that quinolinic acid that is high, and I mean the actual level of it is not high, but the ratio between quinolinate and 5-HIA is high. We know that quinolinic acid is a neurotoxin and could be a result of neurotoxicity. Whether or not that's happening in her case is subject to debate.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, I was just wondering, is there a possibility that she's had C. diff for so long that it could be contributing to the tumor?
That's a good question. I think that with tumor growth in particular, abnormal tissue growth, you want to look at the factors that will regulate the formation of tissue.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that it's highly suspected that people with MTHFR issues might have abnormal tumor growth.
Mm-hmm.
Because just simply because methylation is an important He's an essential process in the formation of DNA. So, you know, all the other things like tumor suppressor genes and things of this nature that will prevent the formation of abnormal tumor tissue growth, something to be considered as being erratic here. So, but whether a C. diff infection could cause that remains unknown.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So moving through the rest of the report, so the 40 and 41 these are the nucleosides, uracil and thymine. These are coming on low, not high. Just as a general side note here, if there is an issue with folate, oftentimes the uracil and thymine come back elevated. There's a folate deficiency, they come back elevated. So we're not seeing that they are necessarily elevated. Now, these are kind of really indirect markers. There's one other marker that I really, really like looking at with folate metabolism on an O test, and that's the formiminoglutamate, or the FIGLU, which you learned about in the course. Yeah. I spoke with Great Plains just recently at a conference, and their representatives did tell me that they are working on including the FIGLU level on their future O tests, which would be fantastic if they got those in there.
Wow.
So, but right now we have to go with what we've got, and so these are the uracil and thymine nucleotides, and these are coming in low in her case. So, no initial evidence of folate issues. We will look at the B12 marker coming up a little bit later.
All right. The only thing that kind of stood out to me was marker 48, which she told me she just started supplementing coconut oil in her coffee.
Uh-huh. Right.
And when I was looking this up, it said that it could be from coconut oil, or it could be a deficiency in carnitine.
Right, because coconut oil contains medium chain triglycerides, which can form ketones easier than other fatty acids can.
Okay.
But there certainly can be other reasons for increased fatty acid metabolites, such as genetic mitochondrial related issues, ketoacidosis, which I don't think is going on in her case at all. And yes, you're correct that carnitine, CoQ10, basic nutrients that support general mitochondrial function are usually indicated if those are high, but it could easily be explained by increased intake of coconut oil, which isn't necessarily a problem.
Yeah. Okay, the next one I was looking at was marker 50, the methylmalonic.
Yep.
And B12 deficiency.
Yep. Excellent observation. So methylmalonate is in the urine. UMMA is a very good indicator of vitamin B12 deficiency.
Okay.
Definitely.
The B6, I'm thinking she's a little bit low, but I was going to ask you.
Right. Well, we looked at the kynurenic acid was not high, but the lab doesn't test for the other one, xanthuronate. That's on the Genova O test. So we don't have that marker in there, but she is showing on the lower side of the paradoxic B6. My understanding is that is only really indicative of a B6 deficiency if it's elevated, not if it's low.
On this one?
Right. So if you look at the lab is saying less than 34 is what they prefer to see. So she's showing 3.6, so it's on the low side. Now, that doesn't mean she doesn't have an increased need for vitamin B6. I think that it would be worthy to look at a pyrrole test in her case, because of the mood-related issues. And that's something that basically we always run, is if somebody comes to us with symptoms of depression or anxiety, do they have signs of a zinc and or B6 deficiency? Do they have signs of a copper toxicity? Because elevated pyrroles strongly suggest the need for vitamin B6. But the upshot of this is that you're probably going to be recommending B6 in some amount anyway.
I did already.
Yeah, because it's a cofactor For dopamine synthesis, it's a cofactor for serotonin synthesis. It's a cofactor for GABA synthesis.
Mm-hmm.
It's essential in amino acid metabolism in general.
Yes.
And it's something that you would, if you were going to do something to promote her dopamine pathways, you would be definitely giving B6 in some amount.
Yes.
So you already did start recommending some B6 to her?
I did, B6 and B12. I recommended folate too.
Okay.
So, but she, as far as I know, she hasn't started it yet. That was just this last Wednesday that I recommended it.
And
so,
how did she started the B6 already?
No.
Okay.
Well, she'll be starting it this week.
My feeling on that is you want to titrate these things in one at a time.
I told her that, and I told her to go very slowly.
Yeah, and I would probably start with the B6 first.
I told her to start with B6 at 25 milligrams and just see what happens.
Yeah,
and
I think that's great.
let me know.
What form of B12 did you recommend for her?
I recommended the methylated methylcobalamin from Sleep Health.
Okay.
And I think this is another thing, like I'm not 100% sure with the blood work, but I thought I had seen her homocysteine, but then when I went and looked back, I didn't. So.
Yeah, I didn't see that in there. We'll take a look at that in a minute. But one thing to know about marker 54 is that I don't necessarily rely on its reliability. I'm a little bit suspicious with vitamin C levels because there's people that take lots of ascorbate show low levels of ascorbate. So to me, that's a sign that there's something not correct with that test.
Okay.
I'd have to speak to the lab directly to find out what their impression that is, but I see that happen a lot. Very low ascorbate despite pretty significant supplementation with vitamin C.
Okay.
So the jury's still out in my mind. Yeah.
She's not taking any vitamin C.
Okay. Right. Well, I mean, there certainly could be said something for the fact that she could be deficient, but
yeah.
I don't know about the reliability entirely.
Okay. Would you say? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Would you say that the CoQ10 marker 55 is that considered high?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. The number 56 N-acetylcysteine.
Right. Again, only really relevant if elevated. That one.
Oh, really?
It's coming back as nothing, like 0, 0. You always look at the lab range. So the lab will establish either a reference interval between this number and that number, or it will say less than a certain number. So in NAC, they're saying less than 0.28. So that's what they want to see, it less than this. If it's higher than that, that's considered more of an issue, according to the lab.
Oh, I thought since it didn't say the high. Okay. Should be low. Okay.
Yeah, so anyway, now there's a few other glutathione markers, numbers 58 and 59. Pyroglutamic acid, which we learned about in the course, is a result of glutathione reformation in the kidney, and that's clocking in pretty much right in the middle in her case, which is a good sign. However, she does have a slightly elevated level of 2-hydroxybutyrate, or hydroxybutyric acid, which is sort of an inactive metabolite of I believe that this metabolite forms when the body generates cystathionine. This hydroxybutyric acid can be a sort of a waste product that is like an inactive metabolite. I think I'm correct when I say that. So it may suggest that she's just kind of shunting some of this. She's shunting a part of this pathway towards an inactive metabolite. She very well may have a need for glutathione, but I'm not seeing a conclusively high indicator of it on the O test at least.
Okay.
And then marker 60 is ammonia, indicator says orotate, and this is not elevated. That's good. A lot of times you'll see gut, if there's a gut bacterial overgrowth, sometimes the ammonia level is very high, but we're not seeing it at least now.
She did comment that her urine smells like ammonia frequently.
Okay, that is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so gram-negative bacteria can produce ammonia from basically the breakdown of the intestinal microbes, Enterobacter, Clostridium. They can metabolize the protein in the gut, generating ammonia. As a result, that's probably the most common source of ammonia is from intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Okay.
But if she is smelling ammonia in her urine, that symptom is significant. You can't always just go by the test.
So how would you address that?
Well, you would address it through supporting gastrointestinal function.
Okay.
So, you know, there may be a number of different mechanisms of getting the bacterial imbalance in check. I've had success with people who are highly symptomatic for C. diff who tested positive for it by taking enormous doses of probiotics. But that may, you know, not everyone with C. diff is symptomatic with diarrhea and...
She doesn't have any of your typical symptoms.
Right.
Which is crazy to me. Like I asked her, you know, do you have gas? Do you have, the only thing she says is sometimes she gets constipated. I asked about bloating, food sensitivities, gas, burping, not really any of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, you know, again, that warrants the potential need to say, well, let's take a closer look at a comprehensive stool test that could really yield some more significant data. Especially if you suspect that there's a gastrointestinal component here. So again, you can't always go by the test. A test is a one-day snapshot of what's coming out of the urine on this day.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, there may be other times where her body is just cycling differently for whatever reason. The body's always in a state of flux and oscillation and fluctuation.
Mm-hmm.
So you might not always catch everything.
Okay.
So that's why, yeah, symptom assessment, asking lots of questions is very important. It's where a lot of these clues will come from, making those clinical correlations. All right, and anything else on the O test of significance?
I don't think so. We talked about marker 70.
Well, we'll briefly touch on number 70. Yeah, so remember we were saying, so phenylpyruvate is coming in borderline high in her case. Now what's interesting is that phenylpyruvate is a product that is a result of the breakdown of phenylalanine. Phenylalanine, if we look at the dopamine pathway, which we suspect is all messed up in her case, the dopamine pathway starts with phenylalanine. Well, technically it starts with biopterin as the cofactor BH4, but it starts with phenylalanine as the amino acid, and then phenylalanine gets oxidized into tyrosine. Tyrosine gets oxidized into L-DOPA. L-DOPA gets converted into dopamine. That's the whole pathway. But then you've got some of these kind of breakdown products of these intermediates. So in terms of the phenylalanine, when phenylalanine gets used, it gets converted into phenylethylamine, and it also gets converted into phenylpyruvic acid. So it seems that she's breaking down phenylalanine, but she's not breaking down dopamine. So those are both related to the same pathway, but one is high, but the other is low. So it's more, I'd say that the problem is somewhere downstream. So you wouldn't give phenylalanine in her case because she's probably not going to convert it into dopamine. You could give tyrosine, or you could give mucuna pruriens, velvet bean extract, which contains L-DOPA, 40% depending on the product that you use. So you could use those metabolite, those intermediates, those either the tyrosine at 400 to 800 milligrams or something like that, or just use the velvet bean mucuna pruriens. Whichever you choose, I would use the B6 or P5P specifically with it because that's the cofactor to convert L-dopa to dopamine.
Okay. Do you
Ask
find...
her, one other thing, ask her if she has problems swallowing.
Okay.
If she ever feels like she has a lump in her throat.
Okay.
That's another sign of a dopamine deficiency, in addition to the brain fog and fatigue that she already has.
Okay.
Sorry, you were going to ask something.
Do you find one of those products to be better, like the tyrosine versus the velvet bean extract?
Velvet bean is going to be much stronger because it's the direct precursor. It's going to have a very strong effect, but tyrosine is also potentially useful because it feeds that thyroid pathway, helps in the synthesis of T4, which we're going to see she's showing low in. So you may want to start with tyrosine. That's something you might want to consider.
Okay.
So her hair test, HTMA, calcium is somewhat high, but her magnesium is significantly elevated. When we see elevations in calcium or magnesium, especially magnesium, it suggests a deficiency state. She does have high blood pressure. She does have, didn't you say muscle cramps?
She said sometimes, but not a lot, but she just has muscle aches all the time.
Muscle aches.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And her sodium and potassium are so low, but both of those were contraindicated with her meds, but also her lithium is low, and that's contraindicated. And what's your view on lithium helping to stabilize sodium and potassium?
Well, it may help in the utilization of vitamin B12, which she's showing low in.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing to consider is that, just going back, sodium and potassium, those are believed to be under the control of adrenal hormones.
And she's very stressed.
The HPA axis.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't always look at the individual markers and say, take this for that, take this because this is low. There are some exceptions to that rule. The zinc and the copper, for example, do tend to reflect the serum status fairly well. So there is a correlation between those individual markers and actual level of zinc and copper. I think the same is probably true of magnesium, especially if the magnesium is higher than the calcium. You know, usually if the calcium is high, the magnesium is high with it. And we're seeing it, but we're actually seeing the magnesium is even higher than the calcium is.
Mm-hmm.
So she's likely, and she's symptomatic for low magnesium.
Yes. And I do want to recommend copper and zinc testing further.
Mm-hmm.
But she is limited on money. She's using her tax refund to pay for all this. So, but she's committed. If that's what we need to do, she said she'll do it. So.
Okay. So.
Go ahead.
So yeah, so there's definitely a few things here. The zinc is 20, and sometimes when you see the zinc pushing the upper end of the threshold of the lab report, I mean, I typically don't want to see zinc higher than 20.
Mm-hmm.
Could indicate a zinc loss. It's not entirely definitive, but serum plasma zinc testing could provide another level of confirmation there.
When you see potassium lower than copper, do you assume that that's a hidden copper?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
If I see calcium very high, it would probably have to be higher than 180 maybe. Then copper might be hidden.
Okay.
Her sodium potassium ratio is 3, which is not really that high. It's maybe slightly elevated, but I would look at this. Yeah, if you're wanting to investigate if there's mood disorder, mental health related issues, I always consider running the zinc, copper, histamine, and pyrols as a combination.
Okay.
Because usually that will provide a lot of data. Remember the importance of histamine and the relationship between histamine and methylation.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even ask questions. Do you have seasonal allergies? Do you get watery eyes? Do you sneeze a lot? Are you allergic to, do you have environmental seasonal allergies?
Mm-hmm.
Those all indicate higher histamine.
Okay.
So something to consider asking about. Okay, so next test here is the blood work. So this was done just in what, February? Sorry, December or January, mid-December.
December. Okay.
Yeah. So she's not fasting. This is not a fasting test. Glucose 107.
She's still high-ish.
Well, for a non-fasting test, it's not necessarily, you can't rely on it. Postprandial, if it's not 12-hour fasting, you know, the glucose could get as high as 115 and it's not really relevant. But that's why we look at, I'm just going to scroll down here, Gretchen. We look at the hemoglobin A1C, that's definitely elevated.
And she has, even on her past, it was 6.0, the last test.
So it's even higher than it was before.
Yeah, so she is rising on her blood sugar.
So it's something we'll learn about in the new course is looking at what specifically the hemoglobin A1C. It's a marker of the longer term exposure to glucose, how long the red blood cells have been exposed to glucose, reflecting about 4 months. But it's also a measure of glycation, the stickiness of the glucose to the hemoglobin. So there's definitely what we'd say red blood cell agglutination. The red blood cells are clumped together. They're stuck to glucose. That's happening to some degree in her case.
Okay.
So definitely the diet is huge in this regard to get the processed foods and sugars out. Of course, there can be other causes of elevated glucose that aren't related to the diet, and we have to consider that inflammation plays a significant role with that as well. At least it can. So back to page 1. A lot of things look good, and I always want to emphasize with people, tell them there's actually a lot of good things with your test. Everyone's looking, well, what's wrong with me? Well, let's talk about what's right, not just what's wrong with you. So, but, you know, in terms of some of the basic markers, the electrolytes may be off a little bit. The chloride, the lower chloride, higher bicarbonate suggests a possible secondary alkalosis pattern. And, but, I mean, blood proteins look good. The albumin is 4.4. That's very good to see that. You know, you'll start to see real, more serious inflammatory issues if the albumin drops below 4. Alkaline phos, that's on the border of being low. That's a zinc indicator. So it could possibly be, you know, maybe sort of a little bit of zinc might help a little bit. 10 to 20 milligrams maybe. ALT and AST, these aren't low, but they're on the lower side. These are B6 indicators if they were low. And we come to the thyroid markers. Her free T4 definitely is low. But her TSH is it's low, not high. Somebody was hypothyroid, they would have a high TSH, you would think, but of course you can't just go by the numbers. She could be, you know, low inside, and the cells could be low in thyroid hormone. But you know, that suggests that there's something happening here with her HPT axis. I mean, she's got a pituitary tumor. The pituitary rig is part of the HPA and the HPT axis. So could be some negative feedback issues. It could be a tyrosine deficiency. She's low in dopamine, so she might be low in free T4. Hey, well, what are we seeing here? So
would you expect the free T4 to come back up with strictly the tyrosine and P5P?
It's possible.
Okay.
It certainly is possible. You know, that's the thing, is that when there's this many low-hanging fruits, when the diet is bad, when there's very likely dysbiosis, varying degrees of intestinal dysbiosis, digestive insufficiency, blah, 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 blah. When you start to correct these fundamental things, you start to see improvements in other things that are higher upstream.
Yes.
Endocrine function. So then again, more questions to ask. Does she have symptoms of low thyroid function? Does she feel cold? She does?
Yes, she feels tired all the time, the foggy brain. But she also has, you know, what she would say is, you know, I have a tumor. Should I be feeling tired? And but she also has like what I would consider slow digestion. Let's see. She said she used to run hot all the time, and for her, she's not hot as she used to be. So you know, that might be cold for her. So.
Right. Right. So some degree of temperature dysregulation. I mean, the pituitary is a key regulator of the metabolism of the body. It's a major regulating gland of the body, produces 9 hormones. So when there's a tumor there, that certainly can pose a problem. I don't necessarily agree that the doctors don't think this is a problem.
I don't agree.
There's other doctors that would disagree as well.
I know.
So she might need to find another endocrinologist. And I know that with benign pituitary tumors, they can go in and pull it out. And she might have sinus discharge and hosing for a while, but
she has searched and searched and searched for a doctor that is willing to do tests that she wants. And she said, I finally feel like I found a doctor that will listen to me. This is the first one that she feels like she's being heard, even though she's just tired of the medical world. She's like, I just want to fix what's wrong with me, you know? So.
Okay. We see that the eosinophils are 4. That's suspicious. When you see an eosinophil that's higher than 3, think gastrointestinal tract. The eosinophils secrete, they release certain inflammatory mediators that destroy parasites, microbes. Eosinophils, you never really want to see higher than 3. They're coming in at 4, so that's slightly elevated.
Okay.
Okay, so again, the A1C is high. Vitamin D markers coming in a little bit on the low side, 33. And then some historical tests. Here's their previous A1C from a couple years ago. Her C-peptide, which is a pancreatic protein. That's not remarkable. So now she did have, if you look at this, she did have a thyroid peroxidase antibody of 16.
Yes.
That's suspicious. That's quite suspicious, in my opinion.
Okay. So that was one of the questions I asked you, is would you worry about that at 16? So
I typically want to see it less than 10 or non-detectable.
Okay.
Thing is if you start seeing dysregulation in the antibody system, that's highly suspicious. Now, just by eliminating gluten alone, that actually might reduce that antibody. That's certainly possible. I've seen that happen before just by cutting out gluten.
Okay.
Antigenic foods. But so whenever you see elevations in the TPO or the thyroglobulin antibody, think gastrointestinal function. So you know that she's had strong reactions to probiotics. That's suggesting there's definitely some microbial imbalances going on.
Not to mention C. diff.
Well, but suspected C. diff, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Triglycerides were coming in elevated on this previous test, slightly elevated at 118. Usually see that when there's glucose dysregulation. So, yeah, she's definitely got her work cut out for her. But
yes. Okay, go back to the IGF one. Do you feel...
which test?
The IGF. Down just a... Oops.
Sorry. Okay.
I don't see it.
What was your question?
The IGF, I was going to ask you.
Oh, IGF-1.
Yes.
Insulin-like growth factor 1.
And her luteinizing hormone.
Is her LH tested here?
Down a little bit lower.
Don't see it.
Keep scrolling. I think it was right at the end.
ACTH. Don't see LH.
Oh, I saw LH.
Well, what was her LH? Was it high or low?
I think it was 30, which it's in range, but to me, you know, I don't know what ideal would be.
Well, LH is gonna fluctuate throughout the cycle. Was she cycling at the time?
No, she's been menopausal for several years.
Okay, she is not cycling anymore. So, well, her insulin-like growth factor is 82. I don't know if that's necessarily a problem.
Okay.
I'm not thinking that it is.
When I looked it up, it looked good to me, but you know, this blood stuff is all new to me, so I just wanted to make sure I'm not overlooking anything.
IGF-1 can inhibit insulin utilization. We know that much if there's a high level of it. It's also a promoter of growth hormone.
Yes.
So given the nature of the tumors being present, something to consider there maybe. Now, if she does run the 23andMe, my report does have a genetic screen for IGF-1. It's IGF-1R. Mutations or risk alleles are considered a downregulation. IGF-1R. Yeah. So overall, I think you're doing great here with this, Gretchen. You should really pat yourself on the back. And yeah, anything else you want to talk about here? So I think that the gut is a big component. I think the dopamine pathway is a component. I think the B12 issue is significant. A few other B vitamins are probably significant. And clearly the diet is needing to be optimized. And if she works on that, I think that your job is just going to be a lot easier overall.
Yes. I was just wondering if, since she is so sensitive, you know, like trying to get her to where she can handle a decent amount of probiotics and the S-Boularti and slowly adding in a supplement. But my thought was that the B12 and the B6, or starting the other way around, the B6 and the B12, would give her the biggest boost in how she feels.
Mm-hmm.
But are you leaning towards the Tyrosine with the B6?
I am leaning towards that more than the DOPA, just because of her sensitivity.
Yeah.
But even that, I would start out slow. But I think starting at the very, very basics and just covering the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think that the diet and the gut that everything is built on.
Yes.
All very critical to address first.
Right.
And sometimes if you don't address those first, it could just lead to bigger problems down the road. But so I would definitely consider that she addresses the yeast issue. You can use things like berberine, grapeseed extract, colloidal silver, black seed oil, things to kind of really shake out some of these non-desirable microbes in the gut.
Okay. Would you start that soon, or would you wait? Because I don't know, I'm feeling like, I don't know if she could handle it right now, but is that?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily jump into that right away. I think you're right. I think we need to get her. You think you need to get her a little bit more stable first.
Okay.
So keep moving forward with the diet, supporting basic digestive functions. You can try something, here and there, and the more you build confidence, the easier it's going to be overall.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Well, great job. Thanks for participating in this. It's been great to have you here.
Yes. Thanks so much for that. That HbA thing. That was, oh my goodness. I felt like I was researching my life out, and I still didn't feel confident that I had a grasp on it. So that's good to feel good. So.
Great. So education is key. Keep teaching her what she needs to learn and pointing her in the right direction. I think you'll be good with that.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in today. We're going to sign off here, and thanks for joining us again. You're going to get an email soon about the Blood Chemistry and Insulin Resistance Mastery course, which is set to be released in the next several days. I know you guys are going to like it. Thanks again, Gretchen King, for joining us. We'll see you again in 2 weeks, everybody. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.